was in PGC. Yeah, sounds promising.
They're doing good. I like that. I like David a lot. He's great at King, smart guy. Yannick from Steer, we worked together. We was off 10 years ago.
Close friend.
Oh, really? Okay.
Actually, all kids study in the same school.
Oh, they do?
Yeah, it's a small world.
That's funny. Yes. Wow. Okay, yeah, I worked with Yannick at Ubisoft 10 years ago.
Ah, that's lovely. Which way? In China or in Switzerland?
I was in Paris when he was in Abu Dhabi. So I helped him set up. I was on the team in Paris to negotiate with the government in Abu Dhabi to set up. And then he moved from China then to Abu Dhabi.
They created the game. The city established itself very well in Abu Dhabi.
70 people? 75? Oh, they're finally, now they're moving into console, like just this year. Right?
What's it working on? Like what type?
What I'm told off the record is it's the new Assassin's Creed, the one set in Asia. But they're, Assassin's Creed is like what, 10 studios, right? So it's not like they're leading on it, but at least they're learning, and because they've been doing mobile and kind of free-to-play casual games before, so now they're getting to actually more. I mean, that's part of, now there's a new group in Abu Dhabi. There's the new leadership in Abu Dhabi in charge of it. The DCT fellows, right? And so yeah, that's part of their mandate is they want different kinds of development in Abu Dhabi as opposed to what they had before. So not just incentivize employment, but also IP creation. So I think my understanding is they talked to Ubisoft, they went over and flew and spoke with me and said, and then he said, yeah, I think it was already part of their plan, so it's not like it changed or anything. But yeah, it's cool. So I'm glad to be in the kingdom. It's been very nice. Everybody's been great. I think so. I thought it was going to be cold, so I wore a winter one today, and then I'm like, ooh, it's
Expect some rain.
I'll be okay. I have my, it was a gift from a friend of mine. He's, I'm trying to think of the Arabic name. You know the coat you wear in the desert? Yeah. So I found one in the office. I have to go get it because I'm not, I keep it at home, but then I'm like, what if I need it when I go out and it's so big and heavy? And my friend's like, yeah, you just wear that in the desert. Yeah, go outside or something. But here, I'll let you guys. Sorry, I'm so sorry. Very nice to meet you. I'll see you soon. Awesome. Thank you. And nice to see you again. Here, it's not awesome. Oh.
It wasn't lucky.
You could like that?
Yeah.
But this wasn't.
Yeah. But work out.
You did it through America?
So, we're partner with Line. mine's pretty easy one. But I want to know more about your students. We should connect after all this.
We're growing a lot. We're onboarding a lot of developers. The biggest problem, frankly, is too much demand. Well, it's hard to keep up with. It's good and bad.
Would you publish them globally, or would you
Worry about customers you have. They're getting enough attention from us. Yeah, we have to. We just have to keep scaling ourselves.
So would you spend on QA and
What we do is there's no shortage of opportunities out there. Really, everybody should be using technology for too many people try to build it themselves. Totally overwhelmed just trying to build that piece. Fortunately, most developers are realizing that in the same way that we realized years ago. 3D engines for are not sufficient to build yourself. You gotta use the rails. For all the back end stuff.
I'm going to take this one. So that.
Do you know what the schedule is? Oh, okay.
ساعتك ولا تدري لا احنا لا 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 لا
Sorry. How's it going? Good seeing you.
Finally, we see each
Yeah.
other.
It's been a minute.
No, we saw each other.
No, it's been a minute.
Let me
Yeah.
start.
Let's discuss that.
Hello, everyone. Good morning or good evening. I think we're already in the afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Riyadة Swalem. I'm from Impact 46 team, and we are excited to be here with you today and shed light on the gaming industry. With us, we have a great panel and from different background. The panel will be led by Dr. Suad. She's the Director of Entrepreneurship Center in King Saud Institute. Will be joining her in the panel Mohammed Sayan from Impact 46 team, John from Beamable, Ibrahim Hafid from Griffin Partner, and Badr Zamil from Kamilna. I will let you guys enjoy the session, and I will leave it to you, Dr. Saad. Thank you. Thank you, Ghad. Thank you for all of you again for investing your time with us to here today. I'm thrilled to hear from our amazing panelists. Of course, we'll talk about big trends in gaming industry that may impact your business or your career. I guess I will start with our first question with Mr. John. As an entrepreneur and game designer, how technology advancement gaming industry, looking back to your career when you founded your first game until this time with the evolution of AIs, and if you give us insight about this.
Okay, so thanks. By the way, thank you for having me here. It's my first time in Saudi Arabia, and it's been very welcoming, so thank you very much. So the question is really about how technology has shaped games. You know, it's an interesting question because actually games have pushed technology forward itself in such a way. Like if we look at all these things like artificial intelligence that are applications of GPUs, that wasn't originally the application of GPUs. The idea back to the founding of NVIDIA is that you have to do matrix multiplies very efficiently, and you need to do that through graphics chips. The early versions aren't really what we call GPUs now, but that led to the GPU by 1999, and then AI became an application of that. So it's interesting to almost turn it around and think about how technology has actually been guided by games. And if you look at all the explosion of games across the world, it has led to all these other areas. So of course there's many other applications, for example, of 3D graphics. There's many applications of big, massively multiplayer or multi-user online virtual worlds, all these things that were described as metaverse a few years back. You know, I'm someone who thinks the metaverse is still coming, even though we don't talk about it as much. All of it comes from the innovation in games. But if we want to talk about games in particular, the real thing that's happened over the last decade is games has always been a very creative field, but it's also been a technology field for many years in that you had to have a lot of expertise of like pure tech hackers as well as the storytellers and the people with really innovative game designs. And it's shifting more and more towards the core of game systems, the creativity of it, the storytelling. And you kind of started seeing that with the emergence of 3D engines. So Unity and Unreal being kind of the two largest game engines that were created. The purpose of that technology is to take a lot of the tech work, the building of the engine by yourself, off of the table so that game developers could focus more on just making a really great, engaging game. And then my own company, Beamable, we're trying to do that, but again, for all of the live ops and back end, all the things that happen up in the cloud. So if you think about multiplayer games, that remains just super fragmented and hard, but it's actually the most important part of getting a game to be commercially successful today. So I think the technology needs to continue to get more and more packaged and support the creative vision of a game team as opposed to the game team has to go and invent technologies and take on all that risk at the same time as they're taking on all the risks of game development.
Thank you very much. Speaking of like this evolution of gaming industry, Mr. Mohammed, how this influenced the Griffin Gaming partners in investment strategy?
Thank you everyone for coming in. As a quick introduction, I'm Ibrahim. I'm an investor at Griffin Gaming Partners. We're the largest gaming-focused fund in the world. We have about $1.2 billion AUM. We do pre-seed all the way to pre-IPO. We're check size agnostic and invest globally. So if you're building anything within the gaming realm, speak to me after. I'd love to learn more. In regards to your question as to how some of these tech advancements really impact how we're thinking about underwriting some of these studios. Really, so let's take AI as an example. A lot of hype around AI over the past year, but AI has been prevalent within the gaming ecosystem for a very long time now. Not sure if anyone plays FIFA over here, but whenever you're happy or sad, depending on if you're winning or losing against the opponent, you're likely blaming the AI. So you know the importance of it. From an investment perspective, what's exciting to me is how developers are using AI tools in terms of being more efficient. We're seeing, so we just recently published a report where we talked to 500 plus studios around the world, and 70% plus of them are already using AI tools in some way, shape, or form. So because we invest both in content and infrastructure, we're really looking for opportunities to really find companies who are helping developers get to that next level in terms of better design tools, better ways to produce content, music, and so on and so forth. But as well as UA. We're talking to a handful of companies who are utilizing some of these platforms to better capture users from around the world by targeting them at their point of contact, wherever. In Saudi, I know Snapchat's a big thing. Rest of the world, not so much. But that's where tools, AI-driven tools, can really help understand developers where to spend their most time when getting whales in the larger user base. So as John said, tech is really, really important within the gaming ecosystem and will continue to be so. We're always looking at the opportunities in terms of how do these tools impact end-game user experience, and we want to underwrite them accordingly.
Thank you. Interesting. So I wonder if this also in the Saudi market, what do you think the major milestone in investment in gaming industry, how this will support?
Yeah, sure. So this is Mohammed Al-Sayyan from Impact 46. Impact 46 is a venture capital company here. It's one of the leading venture capital in Saudi Arabia. We manage more than $1 billion. And we have recently been we're venturing into the gaming market. So as investors, we always look at industries who have close attention from the government. If we look at the fintech industry, e-commerce, food delivery, they all have had very close attention from the government. And what I mean by attention is government support in terms of initiatives to catalyze that ecosystem. If you look at the fintech industry, we have Tamara, who reached the unicorn status. In the food delivery, we have Jahez. In the e-commerce, we have Salla and Zid, who have raised more than $200 million. And the common denominator of these industries is government attention. So for us as investors, we always look at industries or the potential of any industry in Saudi Arabia, especially if it has very close attention from the government, then it has good potential. So from the milestones that we have from the government in the gaming industry started in 2018 with the Esports Federation, which did an amazing job of attracting global talent and highlighting the local talent globally. We have amazing champions who have won global tournaments in FIFA, Call of Duty, Fortnite, all the big titles. And then in 2021, the Gamers 8 event have pursued. In 2023, Gamers 8, the prize pools have reached $40 million, who have won opportunities for the gaming or the esport teams to attract global talents. It's the equivalent to attracting like Cristiano Ronaldo to Saudi Arabia. They're already doing that. So that was a very big win in the esports side. On the game studio side, things really kicked off in 2021 when Safi Group was established. It did a very good job in catalyzing the ecosystem in terms of the community development. But really the big milestone in this area is the announcement last year of the National Esport and Gaming Strategy, which has 86 initiatives to catalyze the ecosystem in game development, in esports, investments, financing, supply chain, technology, with very serious attempts. And the last maybe milestone that's very relevant right now is yesterday we just announced with the National Development Fund to kick off two funds, one accelerator fund, it's an $80 million fund, and then a $40 million fund as an investment fund, which Impact is managing right now. So that's really the milestones who have reached this far. And I would describe the status for the gaming market right now is fertile and ready to take off. So yeah.
Thank you. Badr, how do you see the role of platform?
The platforms business in general, what we call it the evergreen, that type of the games that has no like lifespan. People will keep playing chess or playing card games. It's like FIFA, for example.
So we've been in the industry for like 12 years now. We started as a flash game. It was very basic, and then we got acquired by Peak Games. And that was the trick. When Peak Games acquired us in 2012, I think, they mismanaged the app for a reason, because we are targeting the niche market, which is Saudi Arabia. And they didn't understand what they need, what they want, what kind of gameplay and feature that they need to develop. Therefore, we got our app back in 2014 and we introduced it to mobile games. Since then, our platform been growing fast. The reason is, as a game studio in Saudi Arabia and serving our niche market, which is the Saudi people, for a game that is a cultural, it was our advantage compared to the other studios. We've been competing with studios from China, from France, and so on, with a heavy kind of capital in terms of investing, marketing, UA, but the reason is we have the advantage of understanding the culture of the people. And even in terms of the studio developing, we insisted to have the developers to become Saudis who can understand their players. So I'm a big fan of platform system, platform games, because the more you invest in your game, it can easily expand into different type of games, but with the same engine. So instead of having one card game, you can have multiple card games. And a lot of businesses like Mobility Wear, that they utilize their advantage and just do spin-offs through their own system. The great thing about platform games that you can capitalize your traffic. We have 500,000 daily active users with a duration of 1.5 hours. So 1.5 hours per day. So basically that you can use indirect marketing through it, product placement, tournaments, and utilize that subscription model instead of being aggressive in terms of monetization. However, those traffic is an advantage for you, and that's the advantage of platform system.
I think I'm going to keep asking more questions for you, Mr. Badr. If you can tell us what's the process or the journey, if you can speak of the journey of establishing gaming in Saudi market, today's market.
Okay, we are the happiest, to be honest. We are the happiest nowadays because of the encouragement from the government, the support, because it was a struggle. The struggle is finding the talents. The issue is, I remember when we shifted our business from a VC that we invest in multiple apps, startups, and so on. I shifted to become a gaming company, and I had some people resign. First day, they said, no, we cannot become game developers. We don't want to work in this industry. The reason is, if they decide to move, their experience will be obsolete in the market. We don't have the ecosystem of like studios and employees. And today, we have multiple studios. People who want to get engaged in the gaming as a game developers, they will have more opportunities. And instead of one studio, they will have multiple studios, big studios, and multiple startups. The issue is, and I remember Sergio, the founder of Miniclip, what he did when he started his business, he used to open his startups in front of college. So he take the people who they are interested as an interns and build the ecosystem from there, and it takes 8 years. So what's happening now with the investment, with the encouragement, and the government is spending money, they know that it would take time. It will have some studio that it's might fall. But the great thing that it will create an incentives for people to become game developers. What we used to do is, which is the tough thing, that we used to hire software engineers, training them for 6 to 7 months to become experts in game design. Because as John said, that the gaming is not only Unity, the back end, which is the tough parts, the server side, the logic, when you are into multiplayer games, it's a different story.
Okay. I think, so when we follow up on this with Mr. John, if you tell us about Beamable and how does streamline the process of building startups or building gaming startups, like online games and virtual world.
Yeah, so I'll tell you about Beamable, but let me go back a little bit in time and talk about my background as a game developer before I came to that, because I think there are some thoughts I could share with you for building game companies in this market, and also kind of what it taught me about what the technology needs are in this market. So I ran a game studio called Disruptor Beam, and we specialized in building games based on popular television shows primarily. We built a game based on Game of Thrones, another one based on Star Trek. So all told, we shipped games to about 20 million players. And one of the things that I really found personally gratifying in building a game company, but also what was really at the core of almost every game, is storytelling. So when we built a Game of Thrones game or a Star Trek game, one of the things we had to understand is we were not inventing those stories for the first time. We were reinterpreting those stories for an audience through the media of games. And we really had to go to the core of what made these games really important. So I worked with George R. R. Martin, he's the author of Game of Thrones, to really distill it down to, well, what are you trying to communicate in Game of Thrones? And how do we bring that to life in the game world? A lot of people were talking to him at the time. They really didn't care what George R. R. Martin thought. They only cared about, like, hey, it's popular, so we're just going to go and try to market something called Game of Thrones. But it was only called Game of Thrones. It wasn't actually Game of Thrones, or at least a lot of the pitches he was getting. What's the point of all this? So storytelling is the core, but authenticity is really important as well. And I think if you look around the world to many markets which have started to build a gaming ecosystem and then been successful at it, many of them have been successful because they took the stories and the culture that was truly authentic to them, and they brought it to the rest of the world. I think Poland is a really interesting example, because about their biggest title, which is the Witcher series, it came from a background in the Polish folklore and storytelling, and an author who was very successful there. So like, and they built a massive ecosystem in Poland indirectly because of the success of that. So when I look at, again, I'm a newcomer here, so thank you for welcoming me, and I'm learning, but what I see here is an ancient culture with lots of stories that remain untold in the world at large. So of course you can build games that are, successful here in Saudi Arabia by reflecting the culture authentically, but also an opportunity to bring that out to the rest of the world, which I think is also a really compelling opportunity. So that's what I've learned through storytelling at Disruptor Beam. But here's the thing, when you're trying to tell a story, technology too often gets in the way, and instead of being an enabler of storytelling and game creation, you end up getting stuck with, hiring too many engineers, too many technical people, taking too many risks, and it takes you off of the story. The game features, which are really just vehicles for delivering story, and then the commercial aspects, which are very important for building a sustainable business, meaning, are people retaining? Are they coming back? Are you able to sell people things in the context of the game? All those things are very, very important to build a big business. Those are the things that a game studio needs to actually be super focused on. So 3D engines kind of helped with this a lot in the beginning. Frankly, it's still pretty technical to work with 3D engines. There's probably lots of opportunities just to make 3D engines easier to utilize. That's why a lot of the things you see in artificial intelligence right now are very compelling to some game developers, because it's helping to automate more of their production process. You asked what Beamable does. Beamable is a technology platform. It's an online game development platform, meaning if you think about the top layer of a game is the visuals, the graphics with the 3D engine, everything that happens behind the scenes that allows you to create virtual worlds, multiplayer experiences, but also wrap it in the business logic that helps you understand how are people retaining, how are they spending, what are they actually doing in your game, and then how can you add systems to your game like tournaments and leaderboards and social systems, all these things that actually can contribute back to these KPIs, these economic indicators of retention and spending and whatnot, are driven kind of through this flywheel of social engagement, retention, shipping new content regularly. That's what Beamable helps with. That's what we do. And our aspiration is to be the unity of this business, which means don't just be a technology provider, don't just be like tech parts, but actually build an ecosystem around it. Be an ecosystem where we invite all other developers who have a piece to contribute back to that. So Unity does that through this thing they call the asset store, where if you need a graphics component and you want to add it to your game, they've got a storehouse of things that you can pull from. That hasn't existed for all the complexity of the back end, which is where we really want to help. So that's what we do.
Thank you. So Mr. Ibrahim, from a perspective of investor, what's you think the core element of gaming developer to move from concept to launch successfully?
That's a great question. Also a challenging one, because it really depends. Obviously, we want the founder to be driven. He or she, especially in gaming, and you know this, it's a creative-driven industry. You really need to be passionate about what you're building. You need to be passionate about storytelling, but more importantly, you need to understand the target audience and who you're building for. As an investor, what's important for me at the earlier stage is what the vision is effectively. How are you trying to innovate within, let's take RPG as an example, or sports. So actually, let's take sports as an example because I like sports games. I'm talking to a handful of companies. The pain point within sports right now is that licensing is monopolized. So what's interesting to me is how are founders thinking about innovating within that realm? Is it, building a football game, utilizing the FIFA Pro license and nothing else, and building an arcade-style game which will effectively compete with EA Sports on the mobile realm? So
as a whole, looking for how companies are thinking about innovation, how companies are using or thinking about building a original IP or using other IP to really help with UA. And then on the infrastructure side of things, a lot of it is driven by how are you going to support the game developers, like what Beamable is building. How can you help developers scale the product, help them navigate through the back-end scalable solution side of things, UA, and so on and so forth. And then later stage, it's driven by metrics, all of the above plus metrics. We go really deep into cohort analysis. What does your ROAS look like? What does retention look like? And so on and so forth. But again, there's no one answer. It's just such an exciting space where every founder is unique, every company is unique, and so is the audience. But given that we've been investing in the space for 25 years plus, we understand how casual mobile is unique to its own audience versus mid-core mobile, and so on and so forth. So, yeah, not really a good answer, but...
No, yeah, you can, yeah, of course.
So again, this is from my own experience as a game developer. I 100% agree with the idea of really knowing your audience, and that's something that's hard to pivot away from. Like, you can't start with one audience and then like, oh, we're going to go after a whole new audience now, because so much of the expertise of the team comes from that audience insight. The game design can change a lot, right? You might, actually in the Star Trek game we built, good example of it, we kind of built 5 totally different games. And we iterated pretty fast. Like, the longest prototype we built was maybe 2 months in, and we kind of axed that. In some cases, there were a couple of weeks of work, and we didn't do it. And then, like, the 5th one, it really started to click that we knew the audience would really love the game that we were building, and then that one is the one that actually went into production. The key to doing that really comes down to the velocity of development and a willingness of the team to iterate and learn from the feedback and not get super beholden to ideas that could become super costly if you then spend 6 or 12 months building something that people don't really want. But the velocity is the key, and the ability to then iterate quickly, try new things, experiment, get audience feedback. Like, if you know, like, you may well know the audience really well, but actually get audience feedback from them and use that in your development process. But all the things that slow you down in your velocity, which comes back to that earlier technology question, and it can also come down to team dynamics and things like that. But all these things that could slow you down in iterating is, I think, about the most important thing to solve in your development process when building a game.
I can actually give an example on exactly that with one of our portfolio companies, Spike out of Turkey. So what they did, so their mobile studio, casual, what they did was they built their first game. It took them about 6 months and $3 million. And the general idea was to go out to the market, test with the community, and see if it resonates. And they found that their ROAS was, at the time, 18 months, which is quite a bit. And they realized, okay, this isn't working, but we already have fundamentals. Let's move on to game number 2. So really quickly pivoted. An additional $2 million in additional 6 months, but game number 2 was exactly what the community asked for and delivered. So after that, they started testing. Spent initially $1 million in the first month on UA, and the ROAS for that was 6 months. And then next month they did $5 million. ROAS for that was about 12 months. And then they're like, okay, this is working. Let's continue pushing on it. And then for the 3rd month, they pushed in 10 million in UA, and the ROAS was 14. And for that was the perfect number. This was like, they knew that the game was working now. They actually went to GC, which has a UA program, to get additional funding. But to your point, it's all speed, especially right now with AI tools. It's really, really helpful to be able to build fast, test the game itself, speak with your community, and really double down on what works. Angry Birds was game number 36, I believe. Yeah. Yeah, and you obviously know a lot about that, so.
Yeah, I think if you have insight in this also, Mr. Badr.
We made our mistakes. We didn't know about what you said before. For example, our company invested in a game they invested 3 million in a game. That it was MMORPG, but educational, targeting kids. That was back in 2011, before even mobile kick. So they put it in PC. So if we did that in Vingram, it's a disaster. You will have a very niche market. And when they launched the game, it was total bust. Nothing. So it's okay to fail when you introduce a game, but the issue that it was a big bet that the development took around 3 to 4 years, investing 3 million, and without testing the market. Yeah. If they just made a prototype and tested with kids, they will know that it's not gonna be tempting, especially with games that needs critical mass, which is multiple games. MMORPG, you cannot play it alone. You need actually the traffic in order to become successful. Yeah. So, yes, if you want to go to that industry, you need to understand your audience, and by understanding your audience, you need to test and see their feedback. And that's the cutting edge. If you work in this region and targeting the people of that region, you have that cutting edge.
Thank you. I think if we're speaking on those challenges in terms of financial support with the Impact 46, could you speak about the new gaming fund you have and the key criteria for investment?
Yeah, sure. So our gaming fund, it's a $40 million fund funded by NDF and some other LPs. The main the check sizes range from 500 to $3 million. We invest in early stage, 50% for Saudi, 50% for global, to attract global companies to set up shop here. So we are veterans in the VC ecosystem, but we're not veterans in the gaming industry. We have been fortunate enough to invest in a few unicorns at an early stage previously. So we would like to transfer that knowledge into investing in the game in businesses in the gaming studio or market. And one of the things that we really are keen on is the team. As Ibrahim mentioned, it's really, especially at an early stage, sometimes you don't really have data to validate the team's potential. So for us, the team is really the most important thing. Preferably, from our experience, we like 2 co-founders to be on the company. So we'd like to invest in winners so that they create other winners, inshallah, in the future. That's it.
Yeah. What challenges you served with developers coming to seeking for fund? I know we speak about the teams and I'll think what way they mentioned before about the game design and the flexibility and agility and the system, and also the audience. What others you see sometimes or you're faced with people coming to seeking for fund? Because a lot of people think it's the only issue is the fund, but there's a lot of challenges other than funds. So
after speaking with a lot of the local gaming studios, it's really 2 main problems that they have. They have, so many problems, but the main 2 is funding and talent. That's really the 2 main parts. The funding part, you can draw a conclusion that there are no local funding for the gaming market in terms of local gaming funds that are focused on the gaming market. And from the talent perspective, it's a very young market in Saudi Arabia. It's extremely young relative to other sectors. I would say it's a natural progression. We don't really have talent right now. Our fund is, the main goal of our fund is to catalyze the market, and part of that is to catalyze also talents in the gaming industry. So yeah, those are the main challenges that we have observed.
Thank you. Mr. John, we need your insight to elaborate more in the challenges, especially with the PMAPO and the to gaming launching online? If you have more, I know you speak already about this, but I know that's a lot to hear about.
All right, well, I'll share a few thoughts. I mean, we commented on velocity. I guess to just close that thought, though, here's how to crystallize this. The speed, it's not just overall speed, it's the speed with which you can incorporate the evidence from your development process back into iterating the game. That loop, the evidence to creative loop, is what's really important, because you could build stuff fast. You know, you can also burn a lot of money just building stuff fast that people don't want, right? But the ability to actually acquire information and then use it in your game development process is really key. So when we built Beamable, we really focused on kind of those two sides of things, which is, number one, enable creators just to build stuff and do it quickly, but also start incorporating into their game the things that allow them to instrument and understand and test and do A/B testing and cohort analysis, all of those things, and actually put those things really close together so that it is an iterative loop. Game development, so some additional thoughts. Game development is a craft, and that can't be forgotten. By craft, I mean it's something you kind of learn to get better at by doing it. And it does take a bunch of time, and there's almost an apprenticeship aspect of getting really good at game development. It's sort of like if you're going to make your own furniture, for example. Like, most people who try to make their own furniture don't do an amazing job the first time, because you're learning how to use these tools and how to do it efficiently, and you might have this amazing idea in your head, but it doesn't turn out that way in practice. Game development is kind of like that. Like, you learn by doing, and it does take time. And I think it does take time to build an ecosystem of talent around that as well, which I see a real commitment here behind it, though. So when I hear like Vision 2030, that's a better timeline in my head than if someone was saying Vision 2025. Like, it's really hard to build up kind of the talent around this super quickly, because even with the fastest development tools and great feedback loops, it's challenging to build up the capabilities. And also teams. Here's another aspect. Teams have to work with each other, right? You can throw a whole bunch of talented people in the room. Like, you can find any number of train wrecks across the whole game industry where all they do is they thought, hey, let's just hire really expensive, talented people, throw them in a room, and of course they're going to make a great game, right? No, it doesn't really work that way. Like, people actually have to develop a working relationship. They kind of have to understand what each other is good at. So talent and team work, it's really fundamental to the process of crafting great games, which, again, it's storytelling, it's using the features of a game. You have to do all these really hard things. It's take the story, make it a good story, translate that to a set of features in the game that communicate the story, and then beyond that, you've got an important commercial layer around it as well. Like, and those features have to be good enough to keep your audience coming back continuously and spending money, or there's no business there. And all those things are so hard to do. And the craft of how to build the business mechanics into a game, that's also a craft. Like, learning to do effective product management and understand how to value different features of a game. These are some of the core skills to learn. So we help teams just sort of skip a lot of the technology barriers and get to the core of what's important, that iterative process, and to the extent your team needs to start working with each other to understand effective live ops, product management, all the things that are going to actually help you build a great business. You may well have to learn that, especially in a new game company, but at least like start learning that as soon in your development process as you can.
Thank you. Fair enough. Mr. Badr, considering your prepared card model, if you talk about how you're monetizing the player's experience with compromising enjoyment.
Yes, actually, this is the biggest challenge in any gaming studio, the business side and the creative side. Developers and game designers hate their CEO or the board, because there is the financial goals, and on the other side there is the creative goals. Game designers and game developers, they love to do what they do. They are passionate about the industry, but in order to become sustainable, they need to monetize it. They need to become lucrative and financially positive in order to continue become creative. So it's a kind of a delicate balance. For us, for example, our game, for example, in terms of LTV, it's considered to be low compared to the market. But at the same time, the lifetime value of the customer or the user. However, that's an advantage for us because our goal is actually to have the traffic, and from that we can utilize it. In terms of the features, any free user can enjoy the whole game, but at the same time we made a space for the whales. So we have people who spend $100,000 a year and a user who spent nothing for 10 years. And I hate those 10 years people who never paid, but we have them a lot. But actually, those are considered to become like, they contribute to the community, they contribute to the game. Because once it's a multiplayer game, it's become a social app more than a game. So in terms of the feature and development, you need to consider the business side and to keep your users engaging. And as I said, it's a very delicate kind of balance to keep it.
Yes, totally agree. I know we're running out of time, so I'm just gonna make this open question for anyone I want to elaborate in this. In terms of market trends, what do you think? Trends.
Yeah, I think as a whole, gaming's huge. There are 3.3 billion gamers in the world. 50% male, 50% female. That wasn't true 10 years ago. There were 10% female. So fun stat. Last year, more people watched other people play games than they did Netflix. In the US, by a magnitude of 2x. So there's a lot happening within the gaming ecosystem. In terms of trends to follow, especially as a developer, I'd obviously look at what the gaming ecosystem's like, how casual mobile right now may be challenging post-IDFA, but don't really go after trend. Really focus on what you're passionate about. And then build on top of that. Speak to the community. See where there's opportunity to innovate. And obviously, you need to take into account the local ecosystem. Are developers more, are there more developers on the mobile side of things versus PC or console, or is infrastructure a better opportunity within the ecosystem just because, fintech's already here and so on and so forth. But, I think from an overall trends perspective, what's exciting to me these days is post-IDFA, the intersection between fintech and gaming is quite interesting. That's one. Two, UEFN platforms and studios who are really looking at building experiences within those realms, specifically from a UA perspective. We just saw Disney invest $1.5 billion, an additional $1.5 billion into Fortnite. Sports remains exciting to me. Honestly, everything within gaming is exciting. It's just from a developer perspective, you obviously need to listen to the community, need to be innovating within the space. And I think as a whole, the kingdom is a very exciting place to be. I really like what you guys are doing with the accelerator. I think both from the two pinpoints that you mentioned as funding, one, and then two, talent. And the accelerator really solves for that. So looking forward to partnering with you guys in that realm, and yeah.
Thank you. I think I just conclude my question with Mr. Mohammed. With Impact 46, the role in fostering ecosystem, and attracting leading gaming companies. So can you talk about that? What your role in fostering ecosystem and attracting gaming?
Yeah. So As a gaming fund that is backed by the government, we have certain mandates to catalyze the ecosystem. It's not just a pure VC role or play. Our end goal is really to invest in winners to create other winners. We have seen some success stories maybe in Turkey, in big acquisitions of gaming studios who have then some of the employees that work with that studio create their own studios. And that's not really a strange trend. We see that in fintech and in commerce and all other industries in the entrepreneurial kind of realm. Whenever there is a success, people who have learned from those mistakes and learnings will create their own ventures. So that's really our goal, to invest in companies that will then create other companies.
Thank you.
Turkey is actually a really good example with Peak, which now obviously you got Dream Games and Spike and a handful of others. But to your point, the government support is so important in terms of building an ecosystem where Canada, for example, in BC and Quebec, incentivize studios to come and build in Canada, and they would pay tax rates, which is still ongoing, and now Canada is a very vibrant space, and you're obviously looking to hire talent in Vancouver. But Saudi Arabia is doing the same thing, where they're incentivizing studios to come over here, and for up to 2 years, I believe it's 60% of the salary or something in that regard. But those are, you know, that's how you build a sustainable ecosystem. Yeah. And with the 2030 vision, that's where we're heading to. And as investors, that's why I'm excited about spending a lot of time over here and investing in the ecosystem. So.
Yeah.
So when we talk about trends, though, I like to look at like what are sort of the very macro inevitables rather than chasing specific trends around particular genres and stuff. You're always going to see game studios chasing particular genres or Web3 or whatever, just because it's sort of like highly fundable or something, and that's what attracts them. The things that are sort of the big picture, number one, the technology itself is accelerating so rapidly. Like now I've got, you know, I'm using an iPhone 15, it's sitting here in my pocket. I mean, that's much more powerful from a graphics perspective than computers we had only a few years ago, and not only that, it can do advanced AI right on the device. So like look to the future of what the technology itself is capable of. And I also just look towards children. What are they doing and what are they enchanted by? So like I have twins, a boy and a girl, 12 years old. So it gives me a very real-time A/B test around like what a couple of kids care about. But one of the things I really observe is that they care about games as not only entertainment, but as an outlet for their own creativity. And I think that's huge. Like, whereas maybe kids a few years ago, they were really interested in being like TikTok personality or posting videos on YouTube. Like, my kids actually don't care about that at all. They're much more interested in like building stuff in Minecraft, creating their own game servers. Like, that's what they want to do. And games are really the media category of this century. It's going to continue through the whole century, and people are going to use it as an outlet for their creativity. And as things get easier and easier to make things, that's, I think, really important. But that's what I've noticed. But I'd say look at your kids and what they care about. They'll kind of tell you what's coming a few years down the road. And one of the things I'm also aware of that's more specific to Saudi is how young the population is as well. So it just seems like we're building up this massive head of steam around sort of, you know, more consumer adoption here in this market, more meaningfulness that's really going to be at the core of the population boom that's on its way.
Thank you. It's interesting. Yeah, I agree. Totally agree with this. It's now kids these days is playing differently than old. Like you can see the metaverse, like all the kind of applications of storytelling or role model or like lots of different trends. You can see it with kids playing. I think we'll open it now for the audience. If anyone wants to have a question. Yeah, here. This on?
A question in particular to Mr. John. Video game journalism has been historically critical, like extremely critical of developers. And in the current age of the internet, it's never been hard. Sometimes a game's next entry regresses instead of improving as a result of ignoring those criticisms. How should a developer tackle down that feedback in the creation of the next installment or the next title by the studio?
Great question. All right, so I'm going to share a few thoughts with you. So the question really comes down to how do you incorporate feedback into your game that you're getting from outside, but in particular get through via game journalists. Here's sort of the reality of game journalism. It has kind of become less and less important in terms of how that influences consumer behavior. It used to be 15, 20 years ago, like the Metacritic score and what PC Gamer or Computer Gaming World posted for your review is hugely important, and you'd wage a whole campaign to get a great review. That is not as important now, and that's because consumers talk to each other, they post their own reviews, they pay attention to their own ratings of a game more so than they do from a quote-unquote professional journalist. My observation of game journalism is it's gotten much more focused increasingly on certain constituencies of gamers that are kind of an echo chamber, and I'm actually just not that enthusiastic about where game journalism has gone over the last several years. I think they're focused on the wrong issues. Now, do you listen to your community feedback? The answer is yes, of course. You listen to your community feedback because that's your actual players. Game reviewers are not necessarily your core audience. They might be, in which case you should listen to them like you meant listen to any member of your community. But your community can really help you sell the game. Like your ideal situation is maybe don't spend so much on marketing because your players are so enthusiastic about the game, they're going to recruit all their friends to play, and you build in these really amazing network effects. In fact, when one player recruits their friend and they're playing together, the value of the game to both of them has just increased significantly versus them playing apart, because now it's a social activity for them to engage in together. So encouraging that is important, and of course that's going to happen much more frequently when players feel listened to. Okay, now all that said, here's just the stark realities of game development. Like a successful, what's a hyper successful mobile game? One that's 40 to 50% day one retention would be considered. Yes, that's a solid metric. Maybe Griffin can tell us what stat they look for.
48. Well, so D1 for us, in terms of what good looks like, is between 45 to 50. D7 is about 20 and 25, and D30 is anywhere between 15 to 20.
Yeah, so great, totally consistent. But here's sort of the interesting thing. So 45% loved your game, a VC is going to start throwing money at you. Cool. That means 55% of the people who tried the game didn't even like it enough to play it again. So that's sort of an interesting stark metric. So what does that tell you right off the bat? It's that maybe you shouldn't listen to everybody. So if we go way outside of games, one of the people that I really like a lot is Raul Vora. He's the founder of a company called Superhuman, which is an email program that I use. And one of the things he figured out in their product management is you go and you poll all your people, and you ask them, how would you feel if this just went away tomorrow? And you get rid of all the people who were like, I don't really care that much, or I only care a little bit, and you focus on the people who are like, I really care. Like this would devastate me if it goes away. And then you find out what those people care about in the game. So, or in the software product, which I think translates back to games. So parsing your audience around the true believers and who your core audience is, maybe not even that 45%, but look even into that, who are the people that are engaging heavily, who are the ones who are socially recruiting people. That comes back again to audience insight and really understanding who are your true players, who are the true fans. Listen to them for sure, because otherwise it's at your peril. but don't necessarily listen to everybody. And it goes back to the professional game journalists. If they're one of those true believers, maybe you do want to support them, but by and large, they're not going to be.
First, I think was quite very insightful. I really appreciate the talk and the questions from Dr. Ghada. It's quite elaborating. Even I wrote a couple of questions and they were answered during the discussion. So I really thank you for that. I just wanted to ask one question. So during the gaming development, I don't have much experience in game development, but I want to ask how the budget would be constructed during the game development. So I know the story, when you're trying to tell the story, it try to create exactly. So you try to create the story, and it creates all the features, the system design, UAs, and everything like and such. But what gives into the budget? So for example, like Pal World or independent games, they create very simple games yet very effective, but not very costly as the AAA games. Or for example, you mentioned 3 million, 5 million, really big numbers. But I think like independent games, they cost like 10,000, 50,000, 100,000. So what does actually affect that? Thank you so much.
Well, it really depends. If you're building a AAA multi-platform game, as usually 80, 100 mil plus. Not a venture model. I wouldn't touch it. And like long development cycles. Mobile, specifically hyper casual, casual. Actually, let me answer that question in a different way. You shouldn't necessarily look at what your total budget's going to be. You obviously should forecast as to how many people you need in terms of art, design, etc., and then how much you want to allocate towards UA. But generally, as a VC, I want my portfolio companies to work in milestones. So let's get to beta. How big of a team do we need to get to a beta? Do we need to freelance some of the work? What the UA spend is going to be to get like maybe 5,000 people on board to really test the product, and so on and so forth. And then, if that is successful, how much do we need to get to the next stage, and so on and so forth. As well as, if it's not successful, how much capital do I need to start to pivot and work on game number 2? But as a whole, hyper casual, relatively cheaper. Mid-core, expensive. I can't give you a number because for example, if there's an IP, if there's a Marvel IP associated towards it, completely changes the total budget. So, depends. Unless you have a better answer.
Yeah, like I said, it's a little bit guesswork if you really get to the reality of it. I think it does relate back to how much working experience does the team have together. So their accuracy of guessing what they can accomplish is going to go up a lot when they understand each other's skills and how complementary they are and what they can do, and also identify with some clarity, here are the parts of this game that are kind of risky and therefore we're not as sure about it, and then you're kind of giving yourself so many sprints of development to figure out like whether you can even ship with that. They're better at identifying the pieces that are no-fail missions for the game, meaning what do you actually have to have in the game that you're not going to be able to ship without, and which things are optional or even stretch goals within the game. So that's hard to do unless the team has worked with each other before. So I really personally value, in any team, like work experience, and you'll see that, like, you can be a brand new studio, but it doesn't mean the people there have never worked with each other before. Most studios are formed by at least a handful of people with a lot of work experience together. But a big game, big games can cost hundreds of millions of dollars. It can be staggering how much some games can cost. I'm a big fan of capital efficiency, though. Like, I think it's amazing to look at some of the games that have shipped in the last few years where the budget was like $1 million or something. Like, look at a game like Valheim. It's made by four people. Took them a little bit, I forget, 2 or 3 years or something of development. but they built a really great game that's sold in the tens of millions of units. So you can even see games out there where one person made it, and they were able to ship tens of millions of units. So the capital in doesn't necessarily mean you get the same multiple across the spectrum. In fact, I think one of the most potent and interesting areas for me, particularly as a technology platform supporting all these folks, is the smaller teams and just giving them a lot of leverage where you could see 3, 5, 10, 25 people is maybe a big team. You know, like, give them the tools to just go really at that problem, iterate fast, and maybe for anywhere from 1 million to a few million, they could produce world-beating hits.
As a whole, I think that's a really good question. Gaming is difficult. It's challenging, it's costly. You invest 2, 3, 5, 10, 50 million into something, and you really don't know if it'll be successful till it is. So as VCs, our job is to really navigate through what good looks like and helping our founders get to those milestones, getting to the right audience, getting them relevant IP, supporting with biz dev. So, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. And then we know companies who have raised 50, 100 mil plus, and they're not there anymore.
Yeah, I mean, games is a patience industry. I've seen a lot of people get burned in this industry because they didn't have the patience for it. And that's at every level. Lack of patience in the team, kind of forcing yourself to ship too early. Like, of the games that I've personally worked on, the ones that were most successful were the ones where we had a lot of patience, which kind of relates to capital and runway and efficiency of running the team. The ones where we started looking at like artificial dates for shipping, those did not turn out well. So that, and then, you know, you even see this in the really big companies, like, you know, big companies like Google, Amazon, they've tried to enter into the games market. If the conviction isn't there for a long period of time, and long in games, I mean, a couple of years is not long in games, like, for them to get behind it, you know, it's, unless they have conviction behind like a 5 or 10 year vision of execution, like, they're going to have a lot of trouble. And I've seen that in these big companies that try to fund their way in, but it doesn't really come together.
Even then, like, I think with big tech, they've tried entering into the gaming ecosystem by starting their own studios and throwing capital. That's not how gaming works. It's such a creative ecosystem where you need to let founders do their thing. Obviously, give them resources, but don't put constraints into them for them, as well as the unique development cycles. Again, you know, a lot of cases for a studio to get their first successful game is a 30th, 50th iteration. And big tech is all about speed. And if you don't see it initially, they just kill the project. Google Stadia is a good example. Though I think they had other problems, infrastructure related, but yeah.
Thank you. I have a question to Mr. John. What are here? I'm right here.
Sorry.
What are the challenges and benefits of using gaming as an assessment tool in education?
Oh boy, education is really hard. So many people have tried to take on sort of gamified models of education, and it rarely works. And the reason really comes down to a combination of games are successful when fun is the true core of the experience, number one, and two, when you can relate the game mechanics around that fun to a business model that feeds the fun. And that could be any business model. That could be we ship DLC for a premium game. It could be we're going to ship a game and then 5 years later ship the huge sequel to the game, or it could be free to play where you just putting quarters in. It doesn't really matter what the business model is, but the game mechanics and the story and the execution of the game reflects the fun factor. Super hard to pull off in education. Who's been most successful at it? I'd say like Duolingo has been really super successful at creating like gamified language learning, and you can kind of look to that. I mean, ironically or unironically, I wrote a book on gamification like 12 years ago now, and it was like an anti-gamification book, because I basically in the book I was like, look, it probably isn't going to work, but here's what you should know about game development if you're going to try. Here's probably the biggest message from the book, which I still believe today. You know, there's an aspirational aspect of playing a game. You sit down in a game because you aspire to do something. You want to become that character. You want to be the FIFA team that wins over and over again. Like whatever it is, there's an aspiration behind it. Just sort of learning the next thing in front of you is enough of an aspiration for certain kinds of person who is so intrinsically motivated by the curiosity process of learning. Like that's me, actually. Like I just love learning for the sake of learning, but my belief is that that's not most of the world. So if you are going to do that, you have to supply them with a bigger aspiration beyond kind of like what's right in front of you. Like what is that role model? What is that story that you can help the person understand? And I think Duolingo is a good example of a company that's done that at real scale. So hard to capture. My only sort of advice I can offer on that is apply skepticism, because I think it has failed a lot for kind of good reasons, but I understand the appeal behind it, which is, hey, if you can, you know, if you can plug into the dopamine response cycle and just sort of like drop the dopamine on the person so that they stay engaged with learning, it will work. I think it comes down to how do you get someone intrinsically motivated to learn, and if we can do that, then everything else falls into place. But don't just drop leaderboards and badge systems and little rewards. Like that's like a slot machine, right? Like slot machine works for a certain kind of person, but it doesn't actually necessarily make, other than the people who are addicted to slot machines, which is an unfortunate situation, it doesn't actually make people want to go back to the slot machine once they leave the casino, right? They're not like, oh, I'm obsessed by the slot machine, because it tends to be what we call a Skinner box, where it's a short-term sort of feedback loop that doesn't sustain beyond kind of the immediacy of the experience.
So, but I have something to add. Actually, we've been that. We try to do educational game. Besides the targets, the console, we try to embed the education, the curriculum of the early age school, like math, science, into the game story. That it's an open, the story that, you know, in order to pass a certain level or to acquire a weapon or to improve your robot or what's, you need to solve like equations and something that the kids will enjoy it. But once they know that it's educational, they hate it. We embedded it. It's actually, if we didn't say that it's educational game, they might not notice, but later on, kids just, for example, because we were targeting kids, when it's educational, they don't want it. It's a failure. Sorry, but I think it's a failure.
I think there's a question. Oh, yeah.
Sorry, good.
Yeah, so you've seen a lot of games that really struggle with the attractive aspect of the story. So my question is, how do you balance the game mechanics and the narrative of the game?
Okay, so that is an awesome question. We could talk about storytelling for hours. I mean, here's the thing about storytelling in a game. that's important to realize. So sometimes when people hear the word storytelling, they think what it means is like plot. Plot is important to a lot of kinds of games, right? But the game mechanics, the way you describe the representations in the game, that's also part of the storytelling. So even chess, for example, has a certain story. Chess is not a purely mathematical abstraction, because if it, it calls things kings and queens and pawns and things like that. And it allows the player of chess to kind of attach to something. So there's a certain level for most players of chess where you're thinking through sort of, oh, this is the intrigue of a royal court, or this is sort of a abstraction of feudal military engagement. And that allows you to kind of connect it to something in your mind that's a story that makes it meaningful. All the features in a game tell a story, and how you execute the features are really important within that design. And also when we build highly visual games, like the very immersive games that are out there, the visuals of the game tell a story, and a lot of the storytelling can even be from the environments of the world, and like what's present there, and what does it make you curious about. So storytelling has so many different layers that spans, yes, plot. Plot is not present in many games. Like many puzzle games have a story, but they don't have a plot, right? Many games have a theme, which is a story, but no other obvious parts of story. So we'd probably have to have a long conversation on that, but I would just sort of encourage you to think about everything present in the game is a representation of storytelling in some way, and challenge yourself to think about how do all the features of this game convey kind of that unique meaning.
Thank you, John. Yes, I just wanted the panel's thoughts on the use of AI in game development, because I know the gaming community is kind of against it, whether it be generative AI for game art or game models or assets, or sometimes even game mechanics. So do you think that takes away from the authenticity of the game, or do you think it can add to it and make it a bit more unique?
I totally want to hear the VC kind of input on this in particular, but I'll just share my own thoughts first. So not 100% on the premise of the question, which is that the game development community doesn't accept it. There's millions of game developers in the world, right? So that we're talking about lots of individual humans with lots of opinions. And yes, I can certainly go online, do some Google searching, and I can quickly find like groups of people that, for example, are against certain uses of AI-driven art, and they'll be vocal about it. But that's not just sort of like that much earlier question about like, do you listen to game journalists and let them tell you what to do in your game? I think you have to be very careful to parse what you're hearing kind of in media or from vocal groups. It's not necessarily representative of all game developers, and certainly my own. So first of all, I have a blog. I write a lot about AI and its applications within gaming, and I can tell you there's tons of game developers who are totally stoked about it, because now they feel like we can have a 3 or 4 person team, and maybe that team will have an art director on it who comes up with the art designs, and now for the first time they can train an AI model to replicate more of their own designs without shipping it off to the low-cost bidder who's going to churn out art for them. So I think AI has also leveled the playing field a lot between not just like the AAA, which have these unlimited art budgets, but also these teams that have sort of been reliant on cost optimizing around finding like low-cost art houses around the world who can generate things for you. And it actually allows them to keep a closer knit team and a smaller team. And that's without even getting into the applications of AI in the game itself. Like, I think you're probably getting at like using AI to help you produce the game. That's a cool thing. But also AI is going to unlock a whole set of new ways of even playing a game. If you check out my Twitter, for example, like this is just a little proof of concept we threw together in a day and a half, but me and my CTO, we built a game as part of Andreessen hackathon last year. We won grand prize in the hackathon, and it was because we built like a Dungeons and Dragons style game using generative AI, where the computer was the dungeon master for you, and multiple players. Okay, not commercially shippable. I'd have to spend months more on it to get a cool game going, but like that we got there in a day and a half. Partly because of Beamable, I'd say, and we gave a good server architecture, but also because of generative AI and integrating into it. So like I would just in general, like remember that games is a huge market with a huge number of developers and 1,000 times the number of consumers, and there's every manner of genre, every manner of team size. I wouldn't listen to the, the vocal, AAA pockets that are maybe defending their turf or whatever. I don't want to imply a whole bunch of different psychology behind it, but there's just unlimited reasons out there. Don't generalize is my message.
Yeah, I think I mentioned this. We just recently released our game development report where we talked to 500 plus studios, both early to late. 70% plus responded saying that they utilize AI tools in some way, shape, or form. There is backlash, but to your point, there's backlash in regards to everything. I think from an IP infringement perspective, it's obviously challenging, but as a VC, I'm quite excited about what this means for game development as a whole in terms of efficiency, in terms of, I see AI tools as building blocks. At least now, maybe in 10 years, they can build a game from 0 to 1. I don't know. I don't think so, mostly because I truly think gaming is a very creative industry. You need a very unique thought process where maybe with AGM it gets there, but not anytime soon. But in terms of tools, so a really good example is Model AI, which is a company based out of Sweden, and what they're building is effectively quality assurance within gaming hasn't been innovated in 25 years plus. What they're using, and they're the second most researched AI gaming team, second to Google actually. They're thinking about AI in terms of how can we help developers, and there are a handful of other tools who are thinking exactly the same way, but they're thinking in terms of how can we help developers build their games much faster. Quality assurance hasn't been innovated in 25 years plus, requires a lot of human resources, and what they're saying is that now with AI, what you can effectively do is, instead of individual X running back and forth 25 times and writing it down, you can effectively use AI for just exactly that. I don't know why there would be any backlash against that. We haven't heard of it, and they're actually growing quite fast, and developers love them. And there are a lot of tools exactly like that who are making the game development experience so much better, and in turn, the end user's experience so much better, because now it may not take a year for development, it may take 11 months. So as a VC, I'm really excited about some of these AI tools within the game dev ecosystem.
Actually, there is a good examples of AI applications in the gaming world. For example, RimWorld. What they did is basically creating an AI system that when they see that the player is doing very well, it make it more challenging. So it keeps the dopamine, the rush, the challenge ongoing. But when things get really hard, it's getting easy. So he doesn't get devastated. RimWorld is like a simulation game that it's open box. So basically it's not like a linear game. So using AI and optimizing that to keep the game going, which made RimWorld one of the most highest rated games in Steam, overwhelming with 400 million copies sold. And that was a very basic application for AI. Second thing, that there is a mod in a game called Bannerlords. It's an RPG, open world, but there is a guy who created AI mod to make a generative kind of text through the NPC. So I believe that AI, it still needs time to improve development in a very fast pace. We're not going to produce AAA games within months with AI. It needs maybe after 10 years. That's why big studios are a bit worried. But we can use AI right now for the NPCs, and it will be really good. However, the only issue with AI is cost, if you're going to integrate it with whatever source you're going to use. So I think there is an opportunity for businesses to operate open AI, AIs for gaming, whether it's for generative storytelling, NPCs, and other practices. For us, we use AI in two things. We are trying to improve our CPU for the card games because it's not like chess. There's multiple scenarios for players, and each player has a game. So we need to optimize our AI in case if one of the players leave the room. But we are using another application for the AI for the profanity. We have 10,000 tickets a day, people complaining that this player said that and do that, but I cannot hire a team or I need actually an army to solve those tickets. So we use AI to grade the severity of the profanity, and based on that, it gives a punishment. So AI in the gaming industry, it will be a lovely harmony in the future.
I mean, here's the general comment about gaming, though, that's even bigger than AI. In the game industry, as you kind of stick around it, you'll periodically hear people say two things. This thing is the future of gaming, and the other thing you'll hear is this thing is going to destroy gaming. I would be very skeptical of both of those. Neither of those two things has really ever happened in gaming. So gaming is very dynamic, it's diverse, there's a huge number of players and categories and a business model for everyone and a means of production for everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
I have a question. How to maintain a quality of life in teams in live service games?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
How to maintain a quality of life in teams for a service live game?
Sorry, is that a question? Work-life balance within studios?
Like
in live service games, is what you're saying.
Yes. Don't charge at all. For example, in our workplace, we are only 7 hours. You know, the working hours is only 7 hours. And whenever we decide and plan for a feature or something, there is a planning policy, but however, we never rush them. Sadly, sometimes there's other influence, such as the board or the founders, whatever. They will push the team to produce the game faster, but we have multiple examples, like Interactive Paradox. They just messed up with City Skies 2 because they've been forced to introduce the game before. Cyberpunk. So my advice, I know it's costly, sometimes you need to introduce and test the market, but don't crunch your employees.
As a VC, I say crush them. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, there's a difference between building a game and operating a game. You know, I think there's some truth to the fact that it's hard to build something really great unless you go all in on it. But then you've built it, and you got to keep running this thing forever, and that's a marathon for a long time, hopefully years. Like, you know, I no longer own the game, but Star Trek Timelines is like a 8-year-old game now. It's still going every single week, and just keeps, you know, keeps spitting cash out of the ATM machine. So, like, to do that effectively over the long haul, I think predictability is actually important. One of the things we really learned going back to our first game, which was Game of Thrones, we wanted to ship content every week. Why? Because the television show came out every week, and we wanted to make sure that the content in the game matched the show that you just saw, because that would, you know, support the storyline, and you'd see items and things that you just saw in the episode, and it was like extra cool because you just saw it for the first time. So we had to create a predictable content creation pipeline, and because we did that, we were also able to extend it beyond the TV show episodes, because there's like 10 episodes a year out of 52 weeks. You'd have to keep continuing it. But just making the authoring pipeline, and this, by the way, was the whole genesis behind what we ultimately decided to do, which was sell off games and focus on technology and build a tech company, which was if we could bring people the tool set to bring that predictability so that you knew how much effort was going to be involved in shipping an update. You had a lot of out-of-the-box tools that your product managers could pull from to set up tournaments and events and all the things that you need to do to monetize. That predictability lets you know how much effort it is. Once you get the predictability in place, that's no different than sort of any business that just has to do a set of things every week. And while, yes, of course, there's going to be surprises once in a while, once you understand the process for shipping content, we used to call it the content train. Like the content train didn't stop. It would just keep going every single week. And we built it, and it didn't require, overwhelming effort. We had a few people that were super efficiently doing it, continues to this day.
Thank you everyone. It was an insightful session. Thank you for joining us, guys. Time flies. We planned the session to be 1 hour, and now I think we reached 2 hours. We want everyone to network. This is the essential, and this is the core of business. Get to know each other, and would love to take a group picture there. And definitely this is the start of many event and engagement activity with our partners. Thank you, everyone.
We would like to take a group picture outside, please, this way. Everyone, please.
إذا تبغى يجي شيء كيف بس أنا أشوف الموضوع عادي عرفت؟
بيض صح؟ شوفي مو التنظيم انما التنظيم الماركات صح؟ الماركات الحضور